let's go ahead and start. So Eustacia, did you have a title for today's talk?
Yes, I do. It is Autism, Trigger Responses, and External Experience.
Okay. So if anybody's there that does not know Eustacia Cutler, this is Eustacia Cutler, lovely lady that has so much to say and just completed a new book, which I'm reading. I think it's fascinating. So I think everybody should get that book and start reading it. You're such a great thinker along these lines. So let me hand it off to you and let's get going.
Well, let's get going. Yes. And a trigger response is the vital, never before experienced action on which newborn life depends. A genetic command that plays out precisely whatever the surrounding action. To illustrate, anthropologist Joseph Campbell describes how mother sea turtles dig a hole in the sand up above the tide line. They lay their eggs there and return to the sea. 18 days later, the baby turtles hatch. And here I quote Campbell. Like a fleet of sprinters at the crack of a gun, they make for the heavily crashing waves as fast as they can, while gulls drop screaming from overhead to pick them off. When the baby turtles reach the crashing waves, again I quote, they know immediately both how to swim and that swim they must. In more evolved species, birds construct nests for their eggs, keep the eggs warm until they hatch, feed the baby birds, and teach them how to fly. Motherhood has arrived to help the newly hatched carry out their never-before experienced actions. That is, for most birds. Cuckoos and cowbirds lay their eggs in other birds' nests, handing over the hatching mothering job to other birds. As soon as their young mature, they forsake the nurturing bird on which their life has depended and fly to their own kind. External experience has now begun to play a role. I quote genomics researcher Hans Hofmann on the effect of environment and nurture on genes. Quote, we are just beginning to understand an unexpected new paradigm. Certain genes that regulate phenotypes, groups of physiological traits and behaviors, are actually under social control. The environment, even social and cultural context, can switch genes on and off. Science writer Matt Ridley puts it in simpler terms. He says, genes are not the implacable little determinists we thought they were. The way their promoters react can be determined by external experience. Either way you read it, early life is now reacting and connecting to the external world. Sometimes good, sometimes like the cowbird and the cuckoo, maybe not so good. And sometimes, where there is autism, maybe genetically confused or delayed, a sort of reaction, capable if the timing is right and if the external experience is enticing. You have to want to undertake an action in order to propel your body into action. Here again is an illustration. At a recent Autism and Family Festival, there was a karaoke machine and a gathering of kids were singing into it. After a bit, a 5-year-old autistic boy who had never uttered a sound, he was totally nonverbal, suddenly rushed up to the karaoke machine. He grabbed the mic and he went, ah. For the first time in his life, the music, the rhythm, the action of the words, it all registered. It was magic. He wanted to be part of it. The reward, singing like the other kids. And my guess is he will learn to talk. The will to make something happen that he now wants to have, and the physical concentration it will take him to achieve it will be worth the effort. Much of what I'm saying involves neurology we all of us already know. How and when neurology and social behavior connect, the moment when thought and will propel the body into action is probably social and therefore individual. What I'm suggesting about autism and delayed timing is a guess, but I think it's a guess worth considering. For starters, here's a quote from neuroscientist Antonio Damasio. He says, "We are not thinking beings who feel. We are feeling beings who think. The mind is in the service of the body." Is he referring to the neurological body or the body's social response to the environment? I'm not sure. It's up for question. To digest it, I offer what we do know about human trigger reaction and interactions on which newborn human life depends. First of all, touch. Touch is the first sensation a baby experiences. The warm, never-before hug of another human welcoming the baby into the world of other people. Touch is the baby's first breath of air experience of life outside the enclosed womb. Is it vital for survival? Not for physical survival. Premature babies can be incubated to keep them alive. But what about that first warm hug? Will the lack of it inhibit the baby's first feeling connection to other people? That was the question that haunted the pediatric doctor who was caring for the incubated preemies. She knew that they tend to develop autism, and she knew that basic to autism is social disconnection. Think of the derivation of the word autism, derived by Eugene Buehler in 1905 from the Greek word autos, meaning self. Buehler saw autism as selfism. The pediatrician feared that the lack of that first connecting hug might set the baby up for Buehler's selfism. To avert the possibility, he took the preemies out of their incubators with all their life-supporting tubes attached to them and laid them tenderly in their mother's arms, so each could feel the warmth of the other. PBS televised the act. I can't speak for the preemie, but I saw what it did for the mother. The quiet joy on her face, the way her fingers stroked the baby's cheek. It was a first time, never before experience for her. The PBS program made me think of the early months with my daughter, Temple Grandin, how she slept too much, as if leaving the enclosed selfism of the womb and joining the other world of people didn't affect her enough to wake her up. I thought her oversleeping was a sign of a good baby. I didn't know that you should wake babies that oversleep. When she did wake up, she would resist hugs and pull away. The pattern never changed, other than feeding and washing and dressing. She didn't want to be touched. When she was quite a bit older, well into school, the need for that missed hug overtook her. She constructed a squeeze device with 2 padded boards so she could hug herself. She would kneel down between the boards and with an attached rope pull their padded sides in and out against herself until she satisfied her hug need. She did it for years. The question I have, was her infant need for touch unfulfilled when it should have been fulfilled, and the delayed timing caused autism? Or did the selfism of autism cause the timing delay? I don't know. Bear in mind, double squeeze device enabled her to hug herself. She didn't want anybody else to hug. The PBS program on preemies included an interview with a male pediatrician. He felt that taking the preemies out of their incubators was unproductive and tricky. The baby, with all its necessary equipment for survival, is involved, he said. The mother is involved, and a doctor must supervise. And for generations, Russian mothers have swaddled their babies. Native American mothers have cradled their babies on their back in a cradle board, and little children like to roll up in a rug.
I have a thought about that, Eustacia, if you don't mind my interrupting.
Oh, please do, yes.
It has occurred to me a lot that, you know, because what I do causes me to look at the form of people's thinking, the form and the content of their thinking. And I think about, how does one get a lifetime of experience through the body, through the skin, all the sensory wiring that we have? How does that get encoded in the brain? And then what does it mean once it does get there?
Sensory, that I think you've thought about that.
So the fact that every cell, every skin, every inch of skin is sort of mapped into the brain at every single moment, that information is going there. And but it does seem to me that all of that bodily experience over a lifetime is what is giving rise to the process of thinking. It's an inevitability. Cognition is an inevitability of physical experience. Now, you mentioned Damasio, and I agree with him, because it's your body first.
It's your body, not your mind, that's running the show.
Right.
I agree with.
And your mind is kind of, in my opinion, take it for what it's worth, a kind of an epiphenomenon. And so somewhere in that process, if we're talking about autism, somewhere in that process, the wiring is in parallel, not in series. It's not even interconnected. It's 2 separate pathways. So, but it does occur to me that the part that has to do with what you see, what you bring into your bodily experience and creates your mind, if it's not connected to what all the pathways that are leading out of the brain in the same way.
The connections, again, I keep feeling autism is a disconnection. It's delayed, it's inaccurate. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't connect. And that includes, yes, you're right, touch, the physical of it. Eric Kandel writes about it. I haven't got the quote in front of me right now to give to you, but his point is the way the body takes in raw data and rearranges it according to what's going on in that body. And I think I can't give it to you exactly. I was preparing it for our next talk. Here's where I left off. The other first-time human connection is sight after touch. Newborn babies open their eyes and see. Their first-time sight response looks to be genetic. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson, running tests on early infant imaging, that is how human babies respond to eyes, discovered that a clown doll with big eyes elicited the same response as did human eyes. Going a step further, he found that babies also have the same response to a row of horizontal dots, but they did not respond to a row of vertical dots. I was there when Erikson said this, told us this information, and then he added about the babies. He said, well, it was a mean trick to play on the little babies, but the little babies didn't seem to care. So putting Erikson's sight study alongside of Joseph Campbell's description of newly hatched baby chicks, Campbell noted that the chicks would dart for cover when a hawk flew overhead, but not when the bird was a gull or a duck or a pigeon. He also found that the chicks would dart for cover when a model of a hawk was pulled on a wire over their coop, but not when the model was pulled backwards. The sight response of baby chicks and baby humans looks amazingly similar and primitive. Both are genetically inherited commands that play out as predictably as the baby turtle action. We're not as complicated and fancy as we like to think we are. Fortunately, though, our sight response progresses from the world of horizontal dots to a meaningful social interaction, where we communicate with our eyes. Again, I found myself thinking of Temple, her response to the world as she sees it. I work from the ground up, she says. By the ground up, she means the physical world surrounding her, and she can recall it far better than I can. Proud of her photographic recall, she titled one of her books, Thinking in Pictures. But her pictures do not take in what we see and read in each other's gestures and faces, the social connection of vision. When Temple faces a social problem, she looks at what she calls her database. They're her picture recollections of how she dealt in the past with similar problems and acts on it. Since she's tops at memory and logic, her picture scheme tends to work. But memory and logic are based on what has already happened. What if a situation is in the process of happening and is loaded with look in the eye attitude? I quote now from the New York Times Magazine interview with Temple. I think I recorded some of this in your other first talk. And when the interviewer said to Temple, during the pandemic, a fear of autism is one of the things that anti-vaxxers, and at that politically loaded word, Temple cut him off, told him she'd had 2 Pfizers, a booster, and a flu shot, and she wasn't going to go any further than that. She knew enough to know that he was introducing a politically loaded question, and she would not go there. But did she understand that he was also introducing fear? Fear of autism. The present-day anxiety that a foreign substance injected into your body will change who you are into who you don't want to be. Hard to believe, but that's what anti-vaxxers believe. Do any of you, and I'm sure you do, remember the measles epidemic and the fear that inoculations against measles would cause autism? There were famous mothers declaring publicly that this was a known fact. As a result, non-vaccinated children contracted measles and were hidden while they were ill in order to protect other children from inoculations. And the measles spread. There were very young children who didn't survive. And I noted recently in some publication, measles have returned. Well, now go back a little further to 1960 and the psychoanalytic belief that autism was the result of an infant trauma caused by cold mothering. It took Bernard Rimland, a PhD in psychology and the father of an autistic boy, to prove that autism was not the result of an infant trauma, but of faulty physiological wiring. Those were his words. In 1965, Rimland discarded the term psychosocial and gave us instead bio-neurological, a term we still use today. But the fear never left us, nor did its partner, blame. Blame gives us a target for our fright, a sensible reason why we feel frightened. We can see lacks like blind and deaf. We respond and help. They, in turn, appreciate our help. Our social give and take responses match. We cannot see autism as we can see blind and deaf. We see only unmanageable behavior. Yet autism is a neurological lack as definite as blind and deaf. From birth, autistics cannot see and hear the social world that most of us see and hear. To illustrate what I'm talking about, here again is a story. When I was first in college, I used to read textbooks to a blind student. He told me he'd had sight until he was 16, so he knew what a tall building looks like. There's no way, he said, for those who are blind from birth to understand height. All they know of height is what they can hold in their hand. They have no way to envision it. I would walk the blind student back to his dorm. It was snowy that winter, and the Harvard walks were reduced to single file paths. As we filed through the paths, he said, I call this threading the needle. He knew what a needle and thread looked like and how they functioned. He carried the visual image with him, even to the way he saw himself threading through those single file snowy paths. I think of the poet John Milton composing Paradise Lost after he was blind. His visual memory saw Lucifer hurled flaming from the eternal sky. There's no way that those who are blind from birth can envision sky. I think of the Theater of the Deaf performing Big River, a musical version of Huckleberry Finn. The acting cast was deaf from birth. 2 interpreters spoke the dialogue, and the boy playing Huckleberry danced to the floor vibration. He had an auditory memory. He had no auditory memory of music to guide him, but he had a great sense of rhythm. and the floor vibrated rhythmically to the music. Just as the play was reaching a climax, the orchestra cut out, the interpreters stopped interpreting, but the deaf went right on performing. For 3 of the eeriest minutes I've ever experienced, they filled the stage with soundless action. Like blind or deaf, autism is a live-with condition. We can see that autistics are intelligent and not crazy. We'd like to help. But because we recognize their reality, because we cannot recognize their reality as we can that of blind or deaf, it's hard for us to know how to help. And also, key, autism's social confusion confuses us. We become less sure and more ready to fear. Autistics work with what they have: brain, talent, and the will to make something happen that they want to have happen. Look at Temple's remarkable accomplishments. A formed help is essential, but with it goes our will to make it happen that we want to have happen in order to help them. None of it is precise. There are no answers, only choices. No social answers, that is. But the more we know, the better choices we will make, and the less vulnerable we will be to old-style fright.